It's really weird how game developers dealt with puzzle games when going to consoles. Unlike on early computers, you couldn't just have some simple logarithmic code that functions like a puzzle solving game. No, NES games had story and character design to them. If people wanted to play a puzzle game, they would just buy the puzzle. And so, developers realized that they would need some sort of reference or source to tie into their games to at least give it some value to people wanting to try puzzle games. Honestly, mixing the philosophy of video games and the brain scratcher of puzzles honestly might have contributed to a positive and active development for young children's verbal and learning skills, since it gives them this logical problem for them to solve, thus allowing them to test their knowledge and learning capabilities, all the meanwhile giving them a sort of eye candy or dopamine hit from seeing moving imagery that is tied to the content of the games, and rewarding the player for being able to understand or bypass the problem at hand. Many game developers knew that puzzle-centric games were helpful for young children and would likely be big sellers to parents wanting to help educate their child while still giving them a challenging yet joyful experience. I mean, you had Nintendo making a Tetris-like color attachment puzzle game with Ecology Practice, Game Freak, and yes, it's that Game Freak, made a two-match tile game known as Yoshi using a variety of Mario characters and enemies, and Tecmo would use biblical Renaissance elements to create a game that holds as much expectations as the book behind it. Originally, I only had plans to cover Fire and Ice, until I realized that Fire and Ice is actually Solomon's Key 2. So, wouldn't it be fair to play Solomon's Key before playing Fire and Ice? No, but for real. I only would just want to play Fire and Ice. My reason, well, for one, there's not really much continuity between the two games, and second off, Solomon's Key just doesn't look fun to me. The games are pretty similar mechanically, but Fire and Ice just does stuff a lot better than Solomon's Key. It's sort of an execution difference between the two that I think allows for an overall better experience when it comes to Fire and Ice. And you'll be able to understand better if you just stay and watch the video. The game starts off with this neat intro telling the story about how a fiery invasive force came onto Coolmint Island, which of course is a very cold place. So they summon Donna, this young wizard who I thought for a while was actually a girl, but no, he's a he, unfortunately, to go out and eliminate the fire elements invading the island and also defeat Druidle, the grand... let me rephrase that. The great wizard of the invading force. Is this an allegory to the big bad phenomenon known as global farting? The intro ends and then we cut to this grandmother telling the story of Donna and how he saved the island to her young grandchildren. I'm assuming they're her grandchildren because otherwise this granny fucks! So the game does essentially confirm that the island is restored to peace because this scene does take place after Donna's adventure, which is good to know that eventually the island is restored some way or another, but I don't know, it's a little bit cliche to me. Usually I'm fine with this sort of scenario if it's in a game involving paradoxes or time travel because you usually can't solve these kind of issues whatsoever. I mean, it's time travel, there isn't really a way to solve this issue unless it was like perspective time travel or one that has no effect on the current timeline. This game already predicts the outcome of the story, which, you know, isn't like a bad thing or anything. I just think it's cliche for something like storytelling that already shows the outcome to you. Anyways, when you start the game, you are put into this big map of the island with a variety of worlds to go to and a variety of levels within each world with a linear pathway. However, unlike most games that have story elements or make you follow a route to the culprit or villain, Fire and Ice has a unique map system that doesn't force you on a linear route from point A to point B. You can either begin at the nice and easy going puzzles in World 1, or you can travel all the way to deal with the much more difficult puzzles in World 7. The level within the world also doesn't have any restrictions to them. You can either begin at the first level of the world, or begin at the final level of the world, or even the level 6 of the world. It's really weird seeing a game, especially since it was a game released around the times where games had, for the most part, a distinct difficulty to them the more you progressed, allowing you to choose how you want to venture through your journey. I mean, to be fair, this is all one secluded island, and it's not unlikely that Donna has traveled around this island many times before, so he likely knows how to get around places. The only limitation is entering the boss's castle, where not only do you have to beat all the levels of that world, fair enough, but also required to beat all the earlier castles beforehand. Bit of an odd decision, but I assume assume they didn't want you to skip past each of the bosses, since some do repeat and can describe their comebacks, so it was probably just done so kids won't be like, "Hey, didn't I just defeat this asshole at that layer castle?" Honestly, this kind of freedom given to the player, especially in a game that is very liberal on its storytelling, is very forgiving. Also helps that all your progress is saved and there isn't really any form of game over or continue to this game, so it's overall much more lax compared to its Wait, hold up. Pause. I recognize that sprite. That's not just any old star sprite. That's a star sprite from a Mario game. I can see it. The fatter shape, the liner under his eyes, the sparkle in his cornea. I recognize this from somewhere, but I cannot put my finger on it. The absolute closest I could find was the star sprite in the space zone of Super Mario Land 2. All it's missing is the sparkle in its cornea, but I swear on my mother's soon-to-be added in the far future grave that sprite was from a Mario game made around or semi-earlier than Fire and Ice. I just know it! If any Mario aficionados are watching this, please show me proof that this exact sprite was in a Mario game made before the release of this game. I recognize it, but I don't know where exactly it's from. I will pin your comment if you do so. God, how embarrassing of me. I call myself a Mario fan, and yet I can't recognize where this specific asset is from. Oh well. Anyways, to get back to the topic at hand, your journey will almost entirely consist of solving logic puzzles using what you have, a wand. And since Donna never gets any sort of upgrade or different angles, this means you won't have to worry about completing some specific objective in order to progress, which I think actually strengthens the overall selection design. Since all levels revolve around the moveset of Donna, this does add a strong reason as to why you can access all worlds and levels given to you at your own leisure. Of course, this does somewhat restrict what you can add or do in a level with a limited moveset, but to get around this problem, they simply just explain that this was Donna's earliest adventure, and so he's still just a newbie in training. A lot of these logic puzzles require some critical thinking. I mean, yeah, it's a logic puzzle, so you should be using your critical thinking skills. And I know that might be shut down for a lot of casual puzzle players, but the game kind of remedies this with A, the limited moveset of Donna, which kind of correlates with the second point, B, the much shorter time it takes to do these puzzles. So to get down to understanding, Donna can only spawn and dissolve ice blocks using his wand at a downward diagonal angle. He cannot jump or run, but he can use the terrain to his advantage, such as being able to climb over walls and blocks that are the height of his sprite. He can also shove singular ice blocks to the direction he's facing. He can survive long falls too, so you don't have to worry about heights unless you know it brings you back to down to square one, in which case you can just reset. He cannot touch hazards or enemies, almost all of which represent some sort of flame or fire. He does lose if he does touch one of these things, but you aren't sent out back to the map screen or anything. The game just simply asks you to either restart the level from the beginning or choose to go back to the map. This also means that there are no lives in this game, which also means no game overs. Thank God. This may seem like a no-brainer for a puzzle game, but you also got to remember that it does have story elements tied to it, and since most games involving some sort of adventure will usually punish the player's character due to a specific amount of lives lost, it's good to see a game that shares that kind of element, not sharing the philosophy that comes with it. Another thing I have to commend the game for is the animation. The frame rate runs at this near buttery smooth frame rate, which I don't know if it's 60 or not, but damn does it make the game run really smooth. Like, you can tell when Donna is about to spawn in that ice cube. I know that it is a puzzle game and most of the time you're allocated onto one screen, but the game runs at a constant like this throughout the whole game. Even in the more intense puzzle screens, there isn't a drop of lag whatsoever. And the thing is, often at the time you'd have to sacrifice sprite details or color in order to achieve a consistent smooth frame rate throughout, but here it manages to somehow keep all three of these design choices, which I guess just shows how optimized this game's performance is. Definitely one of the smoothest and most colorful games on the NES. Though, despite the smoothness of the game's performance, there is one thing that doesn't always match up with this performance, and yep, it's Donna. Donna has a bit of a latency between my input and his movement, and it's just enough of a difference to accidentally cause me to double tap the D-pad when I'm trying to get a move on, and accidentally fuck myself over a whole puzzle I'd been working on for 5 minutes. Oh God! Okay, it hurts when that happens. My only explanation for why there's this input delay between the player and character is that since it's a puzzle game, they expect the player to be more steady with their pace. I mean, the timer doesn't end at any point. You have as much time as you need for your puzzle to develop a sensible pattern. But when you're about to finish up a puzzle that's taken you 3 minutes to get done and you're about to dissolve that block below the singular ice block but happen to ram too fast to it and you shove it away, oh man, does that hurt to go through. Man, fuck a lot of World 7 and 9's level design. God, so annoying with these super cluttered screens. World 7 is definitely the point where I had to start pulling up video guides for some of these levels. Sure, I may not get the satisfaction for completing it on my own, but I'm a man who has to play and work on more titles in the coming weeks, and also storage space isn't infinite. So as you traverse through the game, you slowly start saving each world from the leaders of said world. Sometimes you run into someone who is obviously a part of the invading force, and some others have been brainwashed by said invading force, and it's up to you to defeat or save them by clearing their challenges. As you go through each of these, some of these will reveal what has happened. I mean, you get the gist of it from the introduction, but they do help explain furthermore. Eventually, when you make it to the 8th world boss, you rescue the wise man's daughter, who informs you to help rescue her older sister. Once you clear out World 9 by defeating this huge-ass dragon by beating his fairly complex labyrinth, though if I'm being real, this one is still easier than World 4's boss puzzle, like, fuck that shit, man. You save the older sister only for her to get kidnapped, and you meeting face to face with Druidle, the okay, maybe I shouldn't phrase it like that. The fiery wizard who was the one that brought down the burning forces onto Coolman Island. He invites you to his castle at the final world in what I can only describe as grueling, mind-breaking time wasters that do not forgive if you even make a single mistake. Once you finally make it to the final fortress, you get a message from the older sister who randomly explains to you that you have to aim for the eye of Druidle's staff, which is actually in the middle of the staff and not the ore part of the staff. You arrive face to face against Druidle, who sends you down to a bonus room before facing off against him. It's easy as shit. Even with the bonus room at the beginning, which kind of shows off a puzzle that wasn't really used much in the game, it's still easy to set up and get over with quickly when you understand it, so I have no idea why this section was added in. The battle against Druidle is nothing much of a struggle. In fact, you just do the same thing 5 times in a row, and the setup isn't even hard or anything. In fact, there are blind spots you can take cover in since the fire trail never goes through that way. It does require you to play patiently, but this fight shouldn't take you anything more than 3 minutes. Damn, this was kind of underwhelming if I'm going to be honest. I wasn't expecting any hand-to-hand combat of the sort, but this final fortress was such an easy run through. Though maybe I should be glad since the previous 9 levels were so fucking labor intensive to get through. Definitely was fixating on guides for most of those final levels. Eventually you rescue the older sister as she thanks you for saving the island, gives you a smooch, and whoo! Now I can see that male definition in him. He got that Twinkie look. And then the credits roll as the old grandmother explains to the kids that the story wraps up there and Donna eventually grows up to become a great wizard, hinting towards Solomon's Key. However, we're not quite done yet. If you sit on the end screen for a minute, you get the Queen of Coolman Island popping up to give you a little bonus secret for completing the game. Pressing B 10 times on the title screen will let you access the sound test and 50 extra bonus levels, most likely as an apology for that pretty shitty final fortress. Now, I played a few of these stages, and I do think it's a good bonus for running through the whole game, since I'm assuming if you had managed to run through the whole game back in the day, then you probably love this kind of shit. So even more extra levels is pretty neato if you ask me. However, there isn't any reward for beating these. You get access to all these unlockable levels from the get-go, even the 10th stages. And they will always boot you out of the level back into the secret menu for every single level. There is no reward after doing all of these. It's purely bragging rights. So after about a few bonus level runs, including almost beating the final bonus level, I decided that my journey would end here and began wrapping up the recording segment. Is what I would say if we didn't talk about this editing feature. This is probably one of the coolest features in any NES game. Especially an NES game.
I mean, just look at it. It's easy to understand, it gives you access to every base level asset imaginable, and you can come up with your own complex logic puzzles anytime you want. It's not even unlockable. This is actually such a cool thing to add, and it surprises me more that an NES game of all things was able to pull this off. And yeah, there were other NES games with an edit mode, but many of them didn't give you access to all the assets in the game, or were pretty simple to create, so not much to do with it. And even though the size area isn't big by any means, it's still the room size of all the puzzle levels in the main adventure mode. And since this is a logic puzzle game, this edit mode is fantastic for those that want to create something so complex and outside the box that'll make people think, how the hell is this even functionable on an NES? My only gripe with the edit mode is that you can't save the levels! What the fuck is the point of it then, man? The Japanese version lets you save your levels, but I guess the American manufacturers were just too cheap to go for that.
You know, I gotta say, as someone who isn't really too keen on puzzle games, except for, you know, the ones with a very simplistic design, I actually kind of enjoyed this. Sure, I may not have an Einstein brain to figure out a lot of these puzzles, but the journey playing through this whole game, especially a game with a genre that you're not really familiar with, was actually kind of nice. It kind of like felt like I accomplished something. If you want a puzzle experience that requires you to think outside the box, then I'd say this game may be right up your alley. Sure, it may not be the most complex puzzle game imaginable, but it's the most complex one with a whole story behind it, and one that requires you to use something out of a very limited design character. So, is there anything else to mention about this game? Simply, yes. Someone needs to send this game to Sakurai so that I will be able to play Donna in the next Smash game. Donna for Smash, everyone!